"If you can tame that horse, I'll marry you," she laughed. Yet he did the unthinkable. The ranch was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that settles deep into the land and makes every sound feel louder than it really is. The wind moved slowly through the tall grass, and the smell of dry earth and hay hung in the air. Horses stood in the open fields, some grazing calmly, others watching the world with alert eyes. For most people, this place felt peaceful. For those who worked here, it was simply life. She had grown up around horses. Since childhood, she had learned how to read their moods, how to stay safe, and which animals demanded respect from a distance. To her, horses were not just animals. They were powerful, emotional, and sometimes dangerous. She knew their strength and she knew her own limits. That knowledge had shaped her confidence and her sharp sense of humor. That day, she stood near the fence with a few others, talking and laughing. The conversation drifted from daily work to old stories about the ranch. Then, as if summoned by the talk itself, the wild horse came into view. He stood apart from the rest, his dark coat dusty, his muscles tense even while standing still. His eyes were sharp, always watching, always ready to flee or fight. Everyone knew this horse. Some called him impossible, others called him cursed. He had thrown every rider who tried to mount him. Some had been injured badly enough to never ride again. Over time, people stopped trying. The horse was fed, watered, and left alone. He existed on the ranch, but he was never truly part of it. She glanced toward the horse and shook her head slightly. "That one," she said, her tone half serious, half amused. "He's not meant for anyone." That was when the man noticed the horse too. He was not new to hard work, but he was new to this place. He didn't speak much, didn't try to impress anyone. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, his words were simple and careful. There was something calm about him, something steady. He didn't rush. He didn't boast. Someone joked about how many people had failed with the horse. Laughter followed, light and easy. Then she smiled, crossed her arms, and said the words that would change everything. "If you can tame that horse," she said, laughing, "I'll marry you." Her laughter was not cruel. It wasn't meant to challenge or embarrass him. It was just a joke, thrown into the air without weight or meaning. Everyone around her laughed too. To them, it was obvious. No one could tame that horse. The idea itself was funny, but the man did not laugh. He looked at her, then slowly turned his gaze back to the horse. His eyes stayed there longer than expected. He didn't smile. He didn't respond with a joke of his own. Instead, he nodded once quietly, as if he had accepted something important. The laughter faded when people noticed his reaction. Someone cleared their throat. Another shook their head. They assumed he would say something next, maybe admit it was impossible. But he didn't. He said nothing at all. Later that day, when most people had moved on with their work, he returned to the fence where the horse stood. He didn't cross it. He didn't approach. He just stood there, watching. The horse noticed him immediately. His ears turned forward, his body stiffened. He took a few steps back, ready to run. The man stayed still. Minutes passed. The horse did not relax, but he did not run either. Eventually, the man turned and walked away without looking back. The next day, he returned. Again, he stood at a distance. Again, he watched. Sometimes he spoke softly, not commands, not words meant to control, just sounds calm and steady. The horse reacted with fear at first, then confusion. This human was different. He did not chase. He did not demand. From a distance, she noticed him standing there. At first, she smiled to herself. She thought it was cute, maybe even brave in a foolish way, but she expected it to end soon. Everyone did. Days passed. The man kept coming, always calm, always patient. He learned when the horse felt tense, when he felt curious, when he felt angry. He learned when to stay and when to leave. He never forced himself closer than the horse allowed. The woman's laughter slowly disappeared. She began to watch more carefully. This wasn't pride. This wasn't a man trying to prove something. This was something quieter, something deeper. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft orange light, the horse took a single step toward the fence where the man stood. It wasn't much. Anyone else might have missed it, but she saw it and her breath caught in her chest. For the first time, doubt entered her mind. Not doubt about the horse, but about the joke she had made so easily, because the man was not chasing laughter anymore. He was doing the unthinkable. And this was only the beginning. The next morning came quietly, just like the others on the ranch. The sun rose slowly over the land, spreading soft light across the fields. Horses moved gently through the grass, their breaths visible in the cool air. Most people followed their usual routines without thinking much about the day before. To them, the moment with the wild horse had been small, easy to forget. But for the man, it was not forgotten. He arrived early before most people were fully awake. He didn't carry ropes or tools. He didn't bring food or treats. He only brought himself. He walked toward the same spot near the fence and stopped at the same distance as before. He stood there calmly, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes focused but gentle. The horse noticed him right away. At first, the horse reacted as he always did. His head lifted sharply. His muscles tightened. His hooves shifted against the ground, ready to move at any second. His past had taught him that humans brought pressure, force, and pain. His body remembered every failed attempt, every rough hand, every moment of fear. The man did nothing. He didn't step forward. He didn't stare. He didn't try to show dominance. He simply stood, breathing slowly, allowing the horse to decide what would happen next. Minutes passed. The horse paced a little, then stopped. He snorted softly, unsure. This human was strange. He didn't act like the others. The horse watched him carefully, waiting for the moment when the calm would turn into control. It never did. After some time, the man turned and left just as he had the day before. No sudden movements, no disappointment, no sign of failure. This became his pattern. Each day he came back. Sometimes he stayed for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He learned to feel the moment when the horse had enough. When the horse's breathing changed or his eyes grew wide, the man stepped away. He respected the warning instead of pushing past it. From a distance, the woman began to notice something different too. At first, she watched out of curiosity. She leaned against the fence or paused during her work, her eyes following the man without her realizing it. She had expected frustration, anger, or pride to show on his face, but there was none of that. He looked calm every single time, even when nothing seemed to change. Other people noticed as well. Some shook their heads and said he was wasting his time. Others warned him quietly, telling him the horse wasn't worth the risk. A few laughed and said the joke had gone too far. But the man didn't react to any of it. He listened politely and then returned to the fence. The horse began to change in small ways. He stopped pacing as much. He no longer ran the moment the man appeared. His ears still stayed alert, but they weren't pinned back in fear anymore. Sometimes when the man spoke softly, the horse's head would tilt slightly as if listening. These were tiny signs, easy to miss, easy to dismiss. But the woman didn't miss them. She felt something new growing inside her. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't attraction. It was worry. She had spent her life around horses, and she knew how quickly things could go wrong. She had seen accidents happen in seconds. One wrong move, one bad reaction, and everything could be lost. One afternoon, she finally walked over to him. "You don't have to prove anything," she said carefully, her voice calm. "That horse doesn't forgive mistakes." He nodded as if he already knew that. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he replied simply. "Then why keep coming back?" she asked. He looked toward the horse, who was standing farther away than before but not running. "Because he's scared," the man said, "and someone has to stay long enough for him to see that not everyone will hurt him." Her words caught in her throat. She hadn't expected that answer. From that day on, her laughter felt heavy in her chest. The days continued to pass. The man adjusted his approach without anyone noticing. He learned which times of day the horse felt calmer. He learned how the wind affected him, how loud sounds made his body tighten. He learned to move his own body in ways that felt less threatening. Slowly, step by step, the distance between them grew smaller. One morning the horse stood only a few steps away from the fence. His breathing was still fast, but he didn't pull back. The man spoke softly, his voice low and steady. The horse's ears moved forward, then sideways, listening to every sound. The woman watched from across the field, her hands gripping the fence. She didn't realize how tense she was until the horse took one careful step closer. Her heart skipped. No one spoke. No one moved. It felt like the entire ranch was holding its breath. The man did not reach out. He didn't reward the horse with a touch. He understood that trust wasn't something you took, it was something you waited for. After a moment, the horse stepped back again, breaking the connection. But the damage was done. Everything had changed. That night, the woman lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The words she had laughed out so easily replayed in her mind. She had never meant them as a promise. They were just a joke. But now, watching the man day after day, she realized something uncomfortable. He wasn't treating it like a joke. He wasn't chasing her words. He was listening to the horse, and somehow that made her afraid. Because if he kept going, if he truly succeeded, then she would have to face what those words really meant, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. Outside, under the quiet stars, the horse stood calmly in his field. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely alone. The change did not happen all at once. It came slowly, quietly, like morning light spreading across the land. By the time people truly noticed it, the horse was already different. The man kept coming every day. He never rushed. He never arrived with loud steps or sudden movements. His presence became familiar, almost expected. The horse still watched him carefully, but fear no longer ruled every reaction. Sometimes the horse stayed where he was when the man arrived. Sometimes he moved closer on his own. One morning, the air felt heavy and still. Dark clouds gathered in the distance, and the wind carried the smell of rain. Horses often sense changes in weather before humans did, and the wild horse was restless. He shifted his weight again and again, his tail flicking sharply. The man noticed. Instead of approaching, he stopped farther back than usual. He waited. He understood that some days were harder than others. Trust was not a straight road. It bent, turned, and sometimes felt like it moved backward. From the fence, the woman watched with growing tension. She had stopped laughing days ago. Now she watched with a tight chest and restless hands. She didn't tell anyone, but she feared the moment when things would finally break. She had seen it before, one mistake undoing weeks of progress. The man spoke softly, his voice steady against the rising wind. The horse's ears flicked toward him, his breathing slowed just a little. The man took one careful step forward, then stopped. He let the horse decide again. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the horse surprised everyone. He lowered his head slightly. It was a small movement, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't understand horses. But to her, it was huge. It meant the horse was thinking, not reacting. It meant fear was loosening its grip. The man didn't reach out. He didn't move at all. He stayed exactly where he was, respecting the space that had been given. That was the moment when she realized something important. This was no longer about whether the man could tame the horse. This was about whether the horse would choose to trust him. The days that followed were tense. The bond between them grew stronger, but so did the risk. The horse allowed the man closer now, close enough to feel his breath, close enough to hear the quiet sounds he made when he shifted his weight. Then came the day everything nearly fell apart. It happened suddenly. A loud noise echoed from the far side of the ranch. A gate slammed hard against metal. The sound cut through the air like a sharp blade. The horse jumped back in panic, his muscles tightening instantly. His hooves struck the ground hard, dust flying everywhere. The man was too close. People shouted. Someone ran forward. The woman's heart slammed against her ribs as she saw how quickly the situation turned dangerous. The horse reared slightly, fear fully awake again. One wrong move now could mean serious injury. Everyone expected the man to jump back to protect himself. He didn't. Instead, he lowered himself. Slowly, carefully, he bent down and knelt on the ground. He made himself smaller, not weaker, just less threatening. His hands rested open on his knees. His eyes stayed soft. He didn't look away, but he didn't challenge the horse either. The ranch went silent. The horse froze. Confusion replaced fear. This human wasn't fighting. He wasn't running. He wasn't trying to control anything. The horse's breathing slowed in uneven waves. His body trembled, but he didn't bolt. Seconds felt like hours. The woman covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. She had never seen anyone do this before. Every instinct screamed that it was unsafe. Yet somehow it was working. The man stayed still until the horse took a single step forward, then another. The horse lowered his head again, closer than ever before. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring. The man remained calm, steady, patient. Finally, when the horse's fear had settled enough, the man slowly stood and stepped back. He gave the horse space again, ending the moment before it could turn bad. People exhaled all at once. Someone whispered, "That was crazy." But the woman knew better. That wasn't madness. That was understanding. From that day on, the horse changed faster. He allowed the man to stand beside him. He allowed a gentle touch on his neck, then his shoulder. Each touch was brief, respectful, and followed by space. The horse learned that touch did not mean pain. The woman found herself walking closer each day, unable to stay away. She watched the horse's eyes soften. She watched the man's patience remain unbroken. And slowly, something inside her shifted too. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky gold, she stood near the man. "You could get hurt," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." "Then why keep going?" she asked again, her voice softer this time. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the horse, now standing calmly beside him. "Because fear doesn't disappear when you run from it," he said. "It disappears when someone stays." Her chest tightened. She realized then that the words she had spoken days ago were no longer just a joke hanging in the air. They had become a test, one she had never meant to give. That night the horse allowed the man to place a light blanket across his back for the first time. No saddle, no weight, just a simple touch meant to prepare, not force. The horse stood still. No one cheered, no one spoke. It felt too sacred for noise. The woman wiped a tear from her cheek and turned away before anyone noticed, because the unthinkable was no longer impossible, and she could feel it. The next step would change everything. The morning felt different, as if the land itself was aware that something important was about to happen. The air was cool, carrying the soft smell of grass and earth. The ranch was quieter than usual. People moved more slowly, speaking in low voices, as though they did not want to disturb whatever invisible balance had formed between the man and the horse. The horse stood near the fence, calm but alert. The blanket rested on his back now, no longer strange or frightening. He shifted his weight once, then settled again. His eyes were still watchful, but they no longer carried the sharp panic they once had. The man arrived as he always did, steady and unhurried. He paused for a moment, just looking at the horse, reading him. He knew this day carried more weight than the others. He also knew that one wrong decision could undo everything they had built together. The woman stood nearby, her arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't slept well the night before. Her thoughts kept returning to the same fear. What if today was too much? What if trust broke instead of growing? The man stepped closer, slowly. The horse flicked his ears but stayed still. The man placed a gentle hand on the horse's neck, then removed it. He waited. The horse did not move away. People began to gather at a distance. No one spoke loudly. No one laughed. Even those who once doubted now watched with quiet respect. They all knew they were witnessing something rare. The man brought out the saddle. The sight of it made the woman's heart tighten. Saddles had always been the breaking point. It was where every other attempt had failed. The horse's body stiffened slightly as he noticed it. His tail swished once, his muscles tightening under his coat. The man noticed immediately and stopped. He didn't move closer. He didn't hide the saddle either. He simply held it where the horse could see it and waited. Minutes passed. The horse breathed fast at first, then slower. The saddle did not attack him. It did not move on its own. Slowly, it became just another object. The man stepped forward one small step and stopped again. The horse stayed. Bit by bit, the man introduced the saddle, touching it to the horse's side, then pulling it away. Touch, then space. Touch, then rest. The horse flinched once but did not panic. His trust held. The woman's hands trembled. She wanted to stop everything, to tell him it wasn't worth it, but she stayed silent. This was no longer her choice to make. When the saddle was finally placed on the horse's back, a deep silence spread across the ranch. The horse shifted, testing the weight, his muscles moving beneath the leather. He took a step forward, then another. Nothing bad happened. The man smiled softly, but only for a moment. He stayed focused. He did not tighten the straps right away. He let the horse walk, feel, adjust. Only when the horse's breathing stayed steady did the man continue. Slowly, carefully, he secured the saddle. His movements were smooth and calm. The horse stood still. Some people wiped their eyes. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But the hardest part was still ahead. The man placed his hand on the saddle and leaned slightly, adding just a little weight. The horse tensed, then relaxed when nothing followed. The man stepped back again. The woman felt tears slide down her face. She didn't bother hiding them anymore. Then came the moment no one wanted to breathe through. The man placed his foot in the stirrup. The horse froze. The man did not move further. He waited, his foot resting lightly, not forcing weight. The horse flicked his ears, his body tight but not explosive. Seconds stretched thin. Then the man slowly lifted himself just enough for the horse to feel the change. For a split second, fear flashed through the horse's eyes. Everyone gasped. But instead of rearing or bolting, the horse took one unsteady step forward, then another. The man gently settled into the saddle. He did not sit fully upright. He stayed low, balanced, quiet. He didn't pull the reins. He didn't give commands. He simply breathed. The horse walked forward. It was not graceful. It was cautious, uneven, but it was movement, controlled movement. The woman's knees felt weak. She held onto the fence to stay standing. The joke she had once laughed through echoed in her mind, now heavy with meaning. The horse took a few more steps, then stopped. His breathing was fast, but he was not panicked. The man leaned forward slightly and spoke softly, words meant only for the horse. The horse lowered his head. That simple action broke something open inside her. The man guided the horse gently, letting him turn, then stop again. No pressure, no rush. After a short moment, the man slowly dismounted, careful not to surprise him. As his feet touched the ground, a quiet sound spread through the group. Not cheering, not shouting. Just the soft release of emotion people had been holding back. The man stepped away from the horse, giving him space, thanking him with a final gentle touch. The horse stood calmly, saddle still on his back, as if it had always belonged there. The woman walked forward before she could stop herself. She stood in front of the man, searching his face. She expected pride, excitement, victory. She saw none of it. She saw relief, gratitude, respect. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "He did," he said, glancing back at the horse. Her chest ached. She realized then that the unthinkable was not the act of riding the horse. The unthinkable was the patience, the courage, and the kindness it took to get there. And she knew, deep inside, that nothing would ever feel like a joke again, because the final step was no longer about the horse. It was about the promise waiting quietly between them. The days after that morning felt softer, as if the ranch itself had finally relaxed. The horse stood calmer now, moving with a quiet confidence that no one had seen in him before. He was no longer avoided. People walked past him without fear. Some even stopped to watch him, still unable to believe what had happened. The man did not change his routine. He didn't act like a hero. He didn't talk about what he had done. Each day he came the same way, calm and steady, greeting the horse first before anything else. He brushed him gently, spoke to him softly, and ended each session before the horse became tired or stressed. The horse responded with trust. He followed the man willingly. He accepted the saddle without fear. He walked, turned, and stopped with quiet understanding. There was no force, no sharp commands, only communication built on patience. The woman watched all of this closely. She noticed how the horse's eyes had softened, how his body no longer stayed tight and ready to flee. She noticed how the man always stepped back first, always gave space, always chose kindness even when control would have been easier. And slowly, something inside her began to settle. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in warm gold, she found herself standing beside the man near the fence. The horse grazed calmly a few steps away, close but not demanding attention. "You kept going," she said quietly. "Even when you didn't have to," he nodded. "So did he." She smiled faintly at that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them felt different now. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It felt honest. "I said those words like they meant nothing," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone would take them seriously." He turned to her then, his expression gentle. "I didn't take them as a promise," he said. "I took them as a moment." That surprised her. "Then why do all this?" she asked softly. He looked at the horse again. "Because sometimes," he said, "what starts as a joke shows us something real." Her eyes filled with tears, not from fear or pressure, but from clarity. She had spent her life protecting herself with confidence and laughter. She had believed strength meant never being vulnerable, but watching him taught her something else. Strength could be quiet. Love could be patient. Commitment could be shown through actions, not words. The next morning she approached the horse herself. She moved slowly, carefully, just as the man had taught without ever teaching her. The horse lifted his head, watched her, then lowered it again. She reached out and touched his neck gently. He did not pull away. She laughed softly, this time without disbelief. From that day on, she became part of the routine. She watched, learned, and slowly joined in. The man never corrected her harshly. He guided with calm words and steady examples. Together they worked with the horse, not against him. Weeks passed. The ranch returned to its normal rhythm, but something had changed beneath the surface. People spoke differently now. They talked about patience, about trust, about how some things could not be forced, only earned. One afternoon, as clouds drifted lazily across the sky, the woman stood beside the man again. "I owe you something," she said. He looked at her, confused. "You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "I do. Not because of what I said before, but because you showed me something I forgot." "What's that?" he asked. "That real promises aren't spoken," she said. "They're lived." She took a deep breath, then smiled. "So let me say this clearly, without laughter this time." His heart beat faster, though his face stayed calm. "If you're willing," she continued, "I'd like to build something real with you. No challenges, no jokes, just truth." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he smiled, not wide or loud, but warm and certain. "I'd like that," he said. There was no crowd, no celebration, no sudden moment that felt dramatic. Just two people standing on quiet land, choosing each other with open eyes. The horse lifted his head and walked closer, standing beside them as if he belonged there. And maybe he always had. Life continued as it always does. There were hard days. There were misunderstandings. There were moments of doubt. But there was also trust, built slowly, the same way it had been with the horse. They learned that love was not about control. It was about listening, not about proving worth, but about showing up again and again. The woman often thought back to that first laugh, how lightly the words had left her mouth, how heavy they had become over time, but she no longer felt regret. She felt gratitude. Because sometimes the unthinkable does not come through strength alone. It comes through patience, through courage, through staying when it would be easier to walk away. The horse stood calm in the field, no longer wild, no longer feared. And nearby, two people lived a truth that began as laughter and ended as something real.